Welcome in, everybody. This is Blake over at DZone. We've got a very special guest that I'm going to bring up to the stage. You're going to get to learn about Git commands today with Rajeev Bera. So Rajeev, I'm very happy for you to join us today. You're going to be walking us through live sessions on how to learn Git commands fast with best practices. And Rajeev has one of the top Git command articles on DZone, so it's a huge honor to have you here today. So tell people a little bit about yourself, where they can find you, and then feel free to take it away.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Blake. Thank you very much. It's my honor I'm here on this platform. So as you already mentioned, my name is Rajeev Bera, and people call me Raj. And I'm an enthusiastic IT professional and the founder of acompiler.com. So the acompiler is a place for next level learning and training for your IT skills. And you can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is acompiler_com. And today I'm going to share with you Git commands with best practices. So the reason, of course, Git is a kind of distributed version control system, and it's really powerful. And if you are a Java developer or .NET or any other developer, chances are you have used Git in past or you are planning to use Git in future. So, and there are so many technologies which depend on Git. For example, like if I will say GitHub, DevOps, GitOps, there's so many buzzwords in the market, but it all starts with the Git commands. So today I will dive into 21 Git commands. So basically it will take you from basic to intermediate level. All right, so of course, if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask in the chat, and you can follow my Twitter handle, and you can contact Blake, or you can read articles on DZone. All right, so let's dive in. So the very first command for the basics, of course, as I said earlier, we are diving from basic to intermediate level. So, but of course, we can't ignore the basics because this is the foundation. So for example, this is the first command in my list today is git version. Of course, to use it, you have to use git, and then the option is with 2 minus sign and the version. So the idea with the version command is if you are using Windows operating system, for example, you know in advance you're using Windows 97 or 2000 or XP or Windows 10. So you know the version, you should know your tools. That's the very first step. And here, the first step is to know which version you're working. As I have pasted a screenshot here, just below the command. So if, because I'm using Git on Windows 10, and if I will run this Git version, I'm getting 2.32.0, Windows 0.1. Of course, this is the latest version for Windows. It released a few days back. And of course, you can upgrade your version accordingly. It's better to stay up to date. So there's the very first one. You should know on which version you're working. And again, this is super helpful command. I'm still using this command many times. Why? So in Git, we have more than 160 commands. Do you need to learn all those commands? Probably not. Why? Because you might not use them all the time. So if you're stuck at some time, let's say you're stuck in the middle of your program or you need help, there's no internet, you can just type this command on your Git shell and you can get the help required. To use this command, there are two ways. One is git help and the verb. So verb here is nothing but the command name. So for example, let's take an example. I want to know about the config command. So I can say git help config, right? Or I can say git config, then help, the option. So in both ways, you can get the help for that command. Again, super helpful, but really simple to use. All right, so, okay, at this stage, we will assume you have Git installed on your machine and you're ready to work. Probably this is the very first command you will use to set up your identity, right? So, okay, let's take a step back. Why you need to set up your identity in Git, right? So the first answer is of this question, because you can't commit without setting up your identity. You can't do any work without setting up this. So that's the very first command you will use after installing Git. So again, it's very easy to use. Git config is the command, and it has three options basically, as you can see on my screen. One is global, second is local, and third is system. I have seen developers just use global options 99.9% cases because no one told them there is a local and system option as well. I will dive you through the three options, but first of all, let's the syntax. So syntax is easy: git config user option, global, local, or system. Then you have to use user.name and your name in the double quote. Again, this is just an example, right? So you can set up your email address, user.email, whatever your email address is, and of course you can set up different settings. But the interesting point here is what is global, what is local, what is system. So let's say if you will not use any value like no global, no local system, then it will be by default use a local level. So local level means at a project level, right? So let's say you are in the demo project or ABC project and you are trying to set up the git config without any option, it will be specific to that project only. But if you need at global level, like at a user specific level, let's say Rajeev, like for me, I have a system profile in my Windows 10, and I want to use throughout my profile my same name, my same user, my same email address. I can use the global option. And sometimes, very rarely, you might have to use a system level. So system level configuration is basically for the entire machine. Doesn't matter who is logged in. Of course, we rarely use it, or maybe I will say never, because it will never happen. So if it's a multiple, like for example, Windows 10, right? You can log in at the same time someone else can log in, or maybe so, right? So we use, but mostly we use global settings, and very, very rarely system level. But of course, I worked in a project, many projects where company has a policy to use local settings. The reason is developers keep coming, keep changing. So that's why. Again, it depends. So this is all about Git configuration. So let's dive into next command, which is view Git configuration. So let's say you set up the configuration, but how you can view it? Again, you can use the git config command and use the option list. So with the list option, you can see all the configuration. I have all right. So for saving the time, I'm not going through with all the different options. You can elaborate yourself. You can use the git help command to see that. But I will give you those commands which you can use in your day-to-day use, which is more helpful for you, right? So again, at the same time, if you want to check which email address you are using in your Git repository, you can simply check with this command: git config user.email or git config user.name, and so on. So this again is very powerful to check your configuration, because sometimes I have seen developers again and again override their previous settings. So it's better to check first before you set the settings. All right, so now you're ready to start your project. And at this stage, I will say you have your own source code. So right, okay, let's take one step back. When you start your first project, so there are two cases possible. First case is you have your source code on your machine, or you are the original author of your source code, of your code, right? And it's nowhere on the cloud, so it's on your machine. So at that stage, you will initialize a repository from existing code, and you will use git init command, right? So you can see in the screenshot, I'm using in my test project folder, I'm writing git init command, and it's initializing empty Git repository, basically. Right, so there's a very first way to initialize a repository. Right, so, but again, here I'm trying to help you in different ways. So this is not about learning Git command. This is about learning Git command fast with best practices, right? So if you pay attention, in the last line here it says .git, right? So what is .git? So we know it initializes empty directory, but why .git? Let's take a look. So .git is a folder. It's a kind of special folder and hidden folder, basically. It contains all the information that is necessary and required for your project in version control, right? And all the information regarding your commit, remote repositories address, and so on, they're stored in the .git folder, right? So, okay, if you're really curious, you set up your project with git init command, and you can see .git folder. And if you delete that folder, you know what happened? your project will no longer be tracked, right? It will not longer repository anymore. Then you have to do git init again. So please never delete this folder, right? So this is the first way. If you have the source code on your machine, we might have sometime, let's say you join a team and that team already have some sort of project which is already going on, and it's on the clouds. In that case, you will get a copy of the project with git clone command. So it's again simple to use. You can use git clone and the URL of repository, right? Of course, you know all my URL, right? It starts with HTTPS and so on. So you can use the URL to cloning and a repository, remote repository on your local machine, right? So here is a difference. What the technical difference between git initialize and git clone, right? So git initialize will just create a new repository on your machine. That's it. But git clone internally use git init. So basically, you can see git clone is a superset of git init, right? So you can see git clone is basically a combination of git initialization, git remote add, git fetch, and git checkout. Don't worry about these commands. I will dive you in next few slides. But for now, you can see this is important to know, like git clone internally using git init command. Right. So again, git status. Now all right. Let's say you set up the initialize repository, and now you are going to use git status command. Again, as I mentioned here before, first commit, right? So when you check git status, in the very first time, you will get something like this. Like on your branch master, there's no commits yet, nothing to commit, right? But it does not the case all the time. So because I'm using on Windows, so that's the case. The chances are, if you're using Mac operating system or maybe Linux, chances are there may or may not be some other dummy files or unusable files, something like that. There may be .temp file, there may be bin, something else. So let's take a break here. Git is basically to manage your source control, not for the garbage. So .temp bin is not actually your source code. You have not write anything here, right? So ask yourself, do you think this should be a part of your Git source code, Git source control? Of course not. Why? Because they're auto-generated files. If a file is auto-generated or no more required, then it should not be part of your source code. So what should we do now? We should ignore those. How we can ignore those? There is a special file, git ignore, right? So just keep in mind, we just talk about one special folder, which is .git. Now we are talking about a special file, which is .git ignore, right? It's again a special file in the Git. So whatever you mentioned, right, in the .ignore git ignore file, it will ignore all those files, right? So in simple words, .git ignore tells Git which files it should ignore. And the main reason of having git ignore file into your repository, so everyone can have the same copy of the file, and everyone should not check in for those files or folders which you are trying to ignore. So git ignore file should be a part of your source control, right? So let's go back. Let's say these files are there. You created a git ignore file. You just mention their names, or you can use wildcard characters. I will not go deeper in git ignore because we have to cover a lot more commands here. So you can check git ignore, and on the DZone I have write an article about it. Yeah, but for now, let's say you have a git ignore file, and that's really should be your first file in your source code. If you're really trying to become a good developer and you become proficient in Git, right? So let's say you have git ignore file. Now, if you check again, you can see there's a new file here. Now the time to add the file and commit it. So this is our next command, command number 8, git add files. Please pay attention in staging area, right? I will let you know in next slide what exactly staging area is. But for now, this is the command git add -a, which will add your files to staging area. Staging area is nothing but an area between your working copy and your repository, right? So let's try to understand this. So do you remember I showed you one special folder, .git? That is your repository, right? Now, if you're working in directory, let's say you're working in C drive in temp folder, right? Let's say. So temp folder is your working directory. So staging area is between these two. That is staging area. So when we use git add -a, the file goes to staging area, not to your repository. That's very important. Right. So now we have files in our staging area. It's time to make first commit. The command is simple: git commit -m. So the -m is option is indicating -m for message basically. So messages, it should be useful message basically. I noticed many developers in early days they just write some dummy message all the time. But please try to make it a habit to write some useful message. It will help you in long run. I will show you in my next few slides how powerful this command is, how powerful this can help other commands actually, other people actually. And you can create your documentation of this command. That's really powerful. So please, please, please use meaningful commit messages here. Right, so let's say I'm writing this command now, git commit -m, and initial commit with git ignore files. So your git ignore files will be committed to your repository, right? So now you have file committed in your repository. How you can view your commit? Simply use git log command. This is very good command, git log. It's a different options, but for now, to keep it simple, we will use git log. So it will show you a list of all the git commands, all the git commits basically in your in the console. All right. So let's go into the command number 11, which is git count object. Yeah. So why we need this command first of all, and what is the purpose? Of course, as name mentioned, git count objects. Its use is simple. When you use this command, it will help you to know the number of objects and the size. Right, there are many like private Git repositories like in the market. For example, let's say some big players name like for example DevOps and Bitbucket, for example. They have a limit. You can't push unlimited data, right? So this is one of the reasons. And second, you can see your progress in every day-to-day basis. That's really helpful. Git count objects. How many objects are there? How much data is there? Also, it will help you to compare your code very roughly with the colleague over the cloud. So this is git count object. Let's go to the command number 12, which is git branch. Again, git branch, I will call this command one of the Swiss knife actually. You can use it in many ways, many different ways to be honest. And to make it simple, I will just explain, talk about few different steps here. So git branch basically gives a list of branches. As you can see on my screen on the presentation, I just wrote git branch. It's only one command, which is master, and that's why it's showing only master. And if you pay a little bit more attention, there's an asterisk in front of master. So it indicating this master is active branch at the moment. I'm in master. And just so you know, Microsoft has already changed the branch name from master to main default branch name. But I'm using a kind of old repo. That's why you can still see master. There's no harm to using master or main, but I'm just telling you to keep you to stay up to date. Right. So here I'm going to use the same branch git branch command, but this time I'm going to create a new branch because this is again one of the good practice to work in your own branch, then merge it back to master. Never ever make any commit in the master in your main branch. Right, so here I'm creating a git branch, which is I'm calling it feature branch. You can call it anything, but the name should be meaningful. So if I write this git branch name, a branch will be created, right? So let's say you create a branch, you have done your work. Now what next? You should clean your branches. You should delete your branches if no more required, right? Again, we are going to use git branch with the -d option, and then you have to supply the branch name. As you can see, it will delete the branch from your repository. Right, so again, this is again a Swiss knife, git checkout. This is very powerful command. Git checkout we can use in many different ways. So this is basically I'm trying to use git checkout -b option. So what this command do? It will internally use git branch, create a branch, and then you will be on the branch with the -b option. As you can see on the last screen, I'm using git checkout -b and the branch name. So what will happen here? Two things at the same time. A new branch is created, and I'm automatically switched to new branch, which is feature branch 2, right? So this is all about your project, right? You work in your local machine. You're not sharing your code yet. So now we have to share our code with others. This is Git collaboration. And in this area, I will talk about those commands. By using those, you can share your code, source code with others, and you can get their copy of source code on regular basis, right? So let's dive in. Before you start sharing your code, you have to set your remote URL, right? And it's easy to set, as you can see. It's easy git remote add, the short name and the URL. And of course, you can add multiple remotes. So one remote will be added when you just use git clone command. But of course, you can add multiple remote. For example, you can at the same time you can work with 1 or 2 or 3, 4, and number of remotes. Right. So again, you should know how many remotes are there, how many remotes repository are there, and its command is very simple. Just use git remote with the option v, and it will show you the list of remotes remote you added in your git repo. Right? Okay, so I will take a break here. This is one of the most important command. I will say git pull, git push. Right? So let's talk about git pull first. So git pull is basically a concept when you are trying to pull the source code from remote, and it's easy to use git pull remote. So why we need to pull it? Of course, what others has done, we have to collaborate with them. So here what we are trying to do, we are trying to download basically the source code from the remote in our local machine, right? And we have to do that frequently, not one-time job. Like git clone may be a one-time job, but git pull is regular job, a kind of regular job. And the good practice is you should git pull before you push. So you can see the other changes, you can merge them, then you can push. Again, git push, as I said earlier, is the time. So you have the latest changes, you have your own changes as well. Now it's time to push your changes with the git push command. Right, and here is git gc. Every programming language has a garbage collector, right? But of course, Git is not a programming language, but still it offers a garbage collector. So for example, let me take a very simple case. If you're doing a lot of git pull, git push, what happens? You have to clean the garbage with the help of git gc command, right? As you can see on my screen, I'm using git gc, and it's telling me what it's doing, how it's dealing with it, and it's basically trying to help you to make sure your Git is working efficient, fast, and up to date. That's the git gc. There's one more command which is git clean, right? So git clean again. So for example, sometimes you have untracked files in your working area, right? Which are not indexed basically. So you can deal with those with git clean. So these are 21 basic commands which you can use every day-to-day life. And these git commands, of course, it will move you from beginner to intermediate level. There's one more level which move you from intermediate to advanced, but for now, I would like to talk. This is what I have so far for you, the basic commands, so you can use Git in 30 minutes like a pro. But keep in mind, there are a few best practices. Of course, you can read all the detail about the best practices on DZone. I have an article over there. So Git best practices, there's a very popular technique, which is after technique. So again, I will go through with all this very quickly. So A is basically atomic commit. You have to make sure your commit is not really big. It's very small. It's only 1 or 2 file or only one minor change, right? And you have to make sure you're doing frequent commits. Trust me, if you're using AF, these two things, your productivity will boost. You can try it for 1 week and you can see. Then you can compare your productivity for 1 week with the previous one, with the current week, with the previous one. You can feel that. So frequent commits is really good practice. It's help you to stay focused. And the T stands for test before you push or before you commit. Why you need to test your changes before you push? The reason that there is a simple reason, because when you push your changes, it goes to remote repository, right? And if your code is broken, basically you are blocking other people, right? Because let's say you push broken code, other people downloaded it, then they are struggling to fix your broken code. So you block the entire team. So the good practice is you have to test your changes before you push, right? And the second last is enforce standard. As I mentioned, for example, git ignore file. You should have git ignore file. It should be a part of repository, and others should download it. So we are enforcing standard in a graceful way, and we should that. We should use that actually. And the last but not least are of after technique, which is refactoring is not a feature, right? So many developers just keep on refactoring your code, but that's not actually a feature for the business, right? This is for something for developers. And I'm not against refactoring, that's good. But if you will keep atomic commits and frequent commits, you might not need refactoring. Trust me, it will help you in so many ways. And also, the last thing here with the atomic commits, let's say a new developer join your team, and he or she can simply write git log command, and he can see all the previous commits. And because your commits so atomic, so frequent, he or she can understand them without any human intervention, with other help. So give it a try. Any questions, give me a shout. I'm sure this 21 git commands and this after technique will help you to boost your productivity. You can move from beginner to intermediate level. And of course, in case of any questions, feel free to give me a shout. And this is all about the Git. And I will hand over to Blake at this stage. And maybe you have any questions or any feedback, and please feel free.
All right. Wow. That's a great way to power up your week on a Monday. So going through all those Git commands in a very concise way. Huge thanks to Rajeev today. So everybody, let's give Rajeev some kudos there. So really, really amazing stuff. And so then for the next part of this, we're going to be around for a minute or two on the question and answer. So if you have a question or a comment, you can go into your chat and post it away. So if you're Mudit in India, you got a question, comment, like the session, let us know in the chat. Anyone else around the world watching today have any Git questions on Git commands or anything else Git related, post those questions or comments into the chat. We'll be here for just a minute to take them, but huge thanks to Rajeev for starting off this almost end of June meeting and being halfway through 2021. All right, so we'll wait for the questions to come in. So I do, Rajeev, have a question for you while we're waiting for, see if we get any questions coming in for the audience. How did you first discover DZone and what made you want to write there?
Sure. To be honest, I mean, Git is basically, like, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation as well, like Git is basically a kind of
Looks like your audio went out, so let me hit that up. So one sec, we'll get Rajeev's audio back here. Always fun on live. Give us 1 second. We'll keep going and we'll get the Q&A going. So thanks, Lucy. Lucy says thank you for this presentation. So thanks for that. Wait for Rajeev to get his audio set back up again. Take a quick second. working through some technical stuff. So Rajeev, feel free to. Yeah, there you are. How's it going?
I thought I'm lost actually.
No, that's the beauty of live presentations. So it's still a little bit of always some stuff there. So while you're away, just really quick. So it's gonna we were talking about DZone. Sort of how did you first learn about DZone and sort of what made you right there?
Yeah, sure. So of course, actually, I'm a quite enthusiastic software professional, and I was searching one of the question. I can't remember exactly which question I was searching, and somehow I was on Stack Overflow, and Stack Overflow redirected me to DZone. Then I started reading those articles. It really inspired me, and this is how I found DZone actually. And of course, after that, I have seen the developers' work, which they are contributing on DZone. That again motivate me to contribute something on DZone. And from that, it's awesome journey, and I really enjoyed DZone actually. Reading, writing, every stuff is good. It's super cool.
Great. And then one of your other articles, just put that on the screen, top 35 Git commands with examples has been one of the most popular articles on DZone this year. We've got a link to chat. Why do you think this article is so popular?
Sure, I think that's a very good question, to be honest, Blake. Personally, I think the fundamental of success never change, right? So for example, if we want to make a 1,000-story building, we need a foundation. And we are talking about DevOps, GitOps, and so many buzzwords in the market are there. But the fundamental is Git commands. They will never change. They will stay in the market. And thanks for highlighting that article. Actually, I'm planning to update that article by next week, adding more values to it, more examples, more pictures, more screenshots, so audience can get more and more value from that. So that's the plan, yeah.
Great. And then while we were doing the stuff with audio, Lucy Barnett just said, thank you for this presentation.
Oh, thanks. Welcome. My pleasure.
And then we got a question from Anbu, who says, Git fetch versus Git pull.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. That's a very good question. So when we use Git fetch, basically we are downloading the references, not the actual code. But we use Git pull. At that stage, we are actually downloading the actual data content. So you can think very simple words, references and actual data. So Git fetch is basically the reference of objects, and Git pull is the content. Good question, by the way.
Very cool. So we'll stick around, see if we have any other final questions or comments. And so then we had another one from. So we answered Anbu's question, and we also said, thank you, wonderful presentation. So we love all this great feedback.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. And to be honest, Blake, I think it's a different joy when you share your knowledge with the audience, actually. That's really different joy, because at some stage, you learn from other people, right, in different ways. So I think that's really different joy. And I think I'm really grateful for DZone, because DZone is providing that kind of platform for me and for 2,000 other developers, so we can share our knowledge in a graceful way, and people can benefit from it, actually.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just a note, like if you've been following us along, we've got links to Rajeev's website, a compiler on Twitter. You can also get to it from his website. Got a link to his article. Got a link to Rajeev's profile there, as well as DZone. I think over 80,000 page views with 6 articles, if I remember right. So lots more great stuff from Rajeev there. So if you got any comments or questions, let us know. We think this session today was great. And if you've got some other Git stuff you'd like to see Rajeev present on, you can also put that in the comments.
Sure.
All right, so it looks like the comments are going to kind of be, so we got a few here. It is Monday after all. So we'll just essentially start to wrap up here. So huge thanks for joining us around the world. We had all the way to Asia watching us live. This is Blake on the DZone side. We had our very special guest, Rajeev Bera, with us today, walking us through how to learn Git commands fast. And I think did an amazing job doing so today. So we'll definitely have Rajeev back for more stuff. So stay tuned there. You can follow us on LinkedIn, other social channels, so you won't miss anything. And with that said, I'll let Rajeev close us out today and get us fired up for the rest of the week and kind of wrap up his session.
Sure. Thank you, Blake. Thank you. It's again a great honor for me to come on this platform. And yeah, it's great. I love to be back, to be honest. And thank you, Blake.